This is Unpivot, the show for Excel and Power BI fans and anyone who loves chatting about data. I'm Win Hopkins.
I'm Sue Bays.
I'm Giles Mail, still in third place.
And I'm Mark Proctor, still in fourth place.
Yes.
I know I'll win when I'm in first. When are you going on holiday, Win?
Never.
Yeah, Sue,
Never.
you're about to be demoted to the back, aren't you?
You'll miss me too much. I'm
You're
going
still
to
going in fourth
Fabric.
place.
I'm going to Stockholm Microsoft conference in 2 weeks.
That's fine. I wasn't interested in that. I'm just interested in you will become fourth place.
Oh,
Mark
no. My place is kept open for me as second.
Oh, no, we've set a precedent now.
Yeah.
No,
That's
it's
the
not how it
rules
works.
are rules.
You get a jingle, but you get demoted. So, you know, pros and cons.
We made the rules up last time and now they're fixed.
We did.
End of.
Exactly.
Once they're made up.
I'm
Sue's
now
not happy with
considering this.
She may
However,
skip FabricCon.
You can't skip events to not lose your hierarchy place.
oh no, I've seen the schedule. I'm going to FabCon, and I've just heard that I've been accepted to speak on something. So very excited.
Congratulations.
Awesome.
I think depends on what the topic is. But
Yeah.
Are you allowed to share or not allowed to share at this point?
I think I'm allowed to share technical certifications with the genius that is Shabnam Watson, who is just awesome. So
Excellent.
I think I'm allowed to share.
You've shared now.
Find out.
Yep.
Just for you, Sue, I'll do some
now.
editing. If you're not allowed.
Yeah. If I'm not allowed to share, can you edit, please? But I'm pretty sure I am now because it's a couple of
No
weeks
worries.
away. So yeah, I'm really, really excited about that.
If you
That'd be a
edit
big
that
conference.
when you could edit that for whatever you want. You could change that topic to anything.
And you do know that it's not just necessarily being away that can demote your order. It could be your behaviour and your behaviour whilst.
What? You can't just make up new rules on the spot.
Why?
It's gotta be-
You can.
you can, we did, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Win. You did last time.
It needs to be
We
a
need a
majority
spreadsheet.
vote or something like that. There's got to be a rule about creating rules.
Yeah, I agree.
We'll form
I agree
a
with
panel.
that. Yeah. Is the
The
panel
rule
the
about
four of us?
creating rules does not come under the rule about creating rules. It's got to be outside of those rules, or else.
I feel like we need to do some
They have an
Monte
Excel
Carlo.
spreadsheet to work out the hierarchy and the pecking order.
That's scope. Scope. The rule that creates rules is outside the scope of rule.
How did we get onto
Speaking-
that?
I don't know. Speaking of spreadsheets, tenuous segue. Giles, I listened to you on the Financial Modeller's Corner.
Yes,
enjoyed
with Paul Barnhurst. Yep.
Yeah, nice little podcast. I enjoyed your sort of chat there. It was very good.
Thanks very much. Yeah,
So,
I tried to be a bit more serious than I.
You can see
I'm
he's
on
got
this
his serious
podcast.
face on now.
Did
Like
think you
switch.
brought your
Oh, yeah.
better game to the other podcast, to be honest.
Just a different game, you know. It's that's a
Yeah.
professional podcast, you know. We just rock up and chat.
You had a professional face on then. Did you see? He put his professional face on then.
Well, here or on that podcast.
No, just then when
did
Wayne
I?
said about your podcast.
Oh, you know, yeah.
Flicked
No, it was
into
good. Paul's
Yeah.
great. I've been on there. That was my second time. The other time was with a group of people talking about the FMI's CFM exam, I think. And yeah, he does these. I don't know if Mark or Sue, you've listened to any episode of the podcast, but he does these quick fire questions at the end, where it's like, you know, circularities or no circularities, VBA or no VBA, named ranges or not, standards or not. That's quite an interesting challenge because every question you want to go, oh, kind of depends, and you can't. You have to go yes or no. So yeah, it's worth a watch or a listen.
Okay.
It's good. The bit that stuck out in my mind was the comment around the more experienced you get, the simpler you make things,
Yeah.
which I think is a lovely point.
I think
Yeah.
that's genius, actually.
There's a really nice quote, and I don't know who it's from originally. I think Paul may have referenced it, but it's actually harder to build things that are simple. The lazier option is to just make it complicated, but making something as simple as you can takes a huge amount of effort and thought.
Yeah.
Well, there's that quote, isn't there, about I can't remember who it was. Something like, "I wanted to write you a short letter, but I didn't have enough time," or something like that. So effectively, you just, it's like it works with words, with programming. It's like, I haven't got the time to work out how to make this good, so I'm just going to splurge out a whole load of code, and hopefully it will come together at the end.
Exactly. Yeah.
Any other news from anybody this week or the last couple of weeks? Any new no new features? I don't think.
No, PivotBy, it's once a month, isn't it?
So on trim ranges, which last time I said was a red herring. Someone actually said to me they came up with a good use case, which was, I haven't tried it out yet, but they said, "Mark, you're wrong about this. This is a good use case." And I said I was happy to be wrong, and so now I am. So if you use VStack to combine lots of ranges across lots of tables, if you then sort that, you might end up with a lot of zeros at the bottom for any of those blank cells. Apparently, trim range will take off zeros from an array. So therefore, it means that you can then get all of your data and leave out any of the blank rows. So if you VStack the same range across lots of sheets, so apparently I said, I haven't tried it. I questioned him. He said, I tested it out. It definitely works. So there may be a use case after all. He may have proved that I am wrong once again.
He may, but I haven't tested it. But I
haven't tested. I mean, it's still unproven whether I am 100% right on everything or wrong on this
on everything.
One occasion.
And there is other
occasion.
there is other news that's not originally mine. We just had a session, and Danielle Stein-Fairhurst said that GroupBy and PivotBy have now been released on the current channel. I don't know if that is new news, but that came up today, which I didn't know.
No, wasn't. I saw somebody posting about it. I just assumed it was in their beta channel. So, cool, current channel.
Apparently so.
Excellent. All good. Did you get any Oasis tickets, Giles?
Oh God, no. No, not even. Sorry. Oh, there's do you want the whole story? Do you want the long mid-story, mid-size? So Deb and I were separately, Deb Ashby and I were separately trying to do this, and we were going to go together, and my sister and my nephew were going to come as well. And eventually she actually got tickets for Cardiff, I think it is, but she had like 2 minutes to decide. There was only 2 tickets. They were about 450 quid. And I was like, oh my God, there's too much for me to think about. I've got to process whether like I have to tell my sister to get separate tickets. So she had to reject them in the end. Her other friend that was looking didn't get back to her, and they were front row seats, literally front row seats. So that was a bit gutting. We could have done for 450 quid. I'm in the second ballot. That's all I know.
Jeez. Didn't they go up to something like £6,000 or something? There was something on the socials.
The second, they immediately went on these kind of secondhand. That's the wrong word, but you know what I mean, like sales platforms. Yeah, it's horrendous.
Yeah. My bit of news was just campaigning to fix IntelliSense again.
Yeah, I saw
I've been
that.
posting a bit about that. So yeah, IntelliSense in Power Query's just been broken forever. Got prompted by a post on Reddit. Somebody was saying, "Hey, is anybody going to fix IntelliSense?" And it was just like, is this still a thing? Why is this still a thing? So we'll see. It's got quite a few votes now. I don't know.
How's IntelliSense in data flows? Because that's the new environment.
Absent.
Is it absent?
I think that the get around is you don't put a full stop in. If you don't put the full stop in, then you can tab and select. I don't understand why it's so difficult.
No. So the comment on somebody, I'm guessing who, but somebody from admin in Microsoft replied that it's definitely under consideration for the new environment. So the data flow look and feel, Power Query feel, is going to be added to Power BI Desktop and Excel at some point in the future. And when they do that, they'll incorporate potentially improvements to IntelliSense. So
I'm
watch this space.
in. I'm at Data Scotland Thursday and Friday. I'm speaking in Data Scotland in Glasgow, free day event, which is absolutely brilliant. Some of the sessions are phenomenal. But Chris Webb is there, so I'll ask him.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Very good. So
free day. If you're in Scotland and you listen to this and you can get to Strathclyde, it's a free full day conference, and the sessions are just amazing sessions, including mine.
Put a link in the show notes. Data Scotland.
Oh yeah, I'll do that.
Cool. All good. Any other news before we potentially get?
Yeah, I want to know if Giles is going to run with me in Budapest or not. He told me I wasn't allowed to ask him until we got onto the podcast. Sorry, and when the last time you're waiting for
as soon as running chat starts, I'm now putting banners with shortcuts and tips for the rest.
I like
of
that. I
Easy,
can
you got
remember
ready.
the Excel one, and Alt Control T for table or Control L.
Yeah. Sorry, Sue. Carry on. Carry on.
Go on then,
rest of us will
Giles. You're
just
going to
read the
run with
tips.
me.
I will do a practice 5K before the marathon when we're in Budapest.
Lovely. Are you going to come with me to the start?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So Laura and I have said we will come and we will support 100%. We will do a tour of the pubs en route around your marathon as you run. We'll
As
be
long
there
as
for
you're
the start and the
trying
end.
to tidy with me as soon as I finish, that's fine.
That I can commit to.
Okay. All right.
There
Happy.
you go, Win. That wasn't too bad, was it?
No, that's good.
2
Excellent.
minutes running.
I'm sure I'll get weaved back in somewhere, but all right. Question of the week.
Jingle time.
Jingle time. I've got a new jingle.
Jingles.
Okay, this one goes on for 2 short verses. It'll just be all a jingle by the end of the series of these podcasts. It'll just be a 45-minute jingle, 5-minute chat. That's what my plan anyway. Then I'll release an album, and then I'll
You'll be
Retire.
gone.
And then
You'll be too big
retire.
for us.
You'll retire
that's
on
my
the
plan.
royalties.
So I've spoken my plan out loud. So there it is. Right, here we go.
It's going to happen now.
It's that time in the Unpivot show where we pose a question and tell you what we know. We may be right, we may be wrong. It's just an excuse to play this song. It's the question, it's the question, it's the question of the week. It's the question, it's the question, it's the question of the week. What's our answer going to be? Do you think the same or do you disagree? There's no silly question, just a silly song. This is how it ends. Next time, sing along.
That's better than the talking. That's great.
It keeps going. It keeps going. So what is the question of the week? It is, if you only had 3 functions. So, and we're basically giving people some and a couple of others. What we got? That's the main topic. That's the question of the week.
Oh.
So we give you some, if, and I got to kill this back.
I was going to say, do you know the song's still going?
Just kill it. So if you only had 3 functions, you're given some, if, and, or, min, max, average, those base ones. And this could be Excel or Power BI. Gets you thinking. And there was lots of good discussion. Oh, yes. Yes, please do, Mark.
If I don't want and or, can I take them out and replace them with something else?
As your, like if you don't need to use them.
Well, you don't like and or. You can just
Yes.
use like logic tests, so you don't need and or anymore. So therefore, if I can take them out, no, you say no.
You think you're
They just
overthinking
give
this.
them. They just assumed.
This game's
Swapping
rigged.
them out would be adding a couple of the functions that you really need. Surely that which is the game. So yes, quite a lot of interesting discussion on LinkedIn around it as well.
I saw.
Some very common ones, a few strange ones. But does anybody want to kick off? Could be Excel, could be Power BI. Anyone want to go first?
Mark, it felt like you had some very strong opinions coming on this. Do you want to lead us off?
I can start. So Excel wise, so Excel wise, I'm going to say we need to get out of an Excel mindset and think in a Power BI mindset. Okay.
I hate it already.
Yeah. So
Love it, love it, love it.
there's a whole plan and structure to this. So at a London Excel meetup group a few years ago, there's a trainer who probably lives down your way, Sue, called Oakley Turvey, I think his
Oh
last
yeah, I
name is.
know. Okay, yeah.
And he did a presentation about Power BI, and he said something that stuck with me. He said, ultimately, Power BI does two things. Okay, it filters and it aggregates.
Yeah.
Okay, so it does two things. So if we apply this to Excel, right,
I'd say
that
3.
means that if we use filter and we use aggregate as a function, we can replace sum ifs, count ifs, average ifs, max ifs. We can replace all the ifs functions. So filter and then aggregate get you pretty much anything you want to do from a data analysis perspective. And then, because you can't create relationships, you can use filter, which will then get you a list of the records, and then an index to select the first item, and that will give you all of pretty much most of your lookup functions. So my 3 are going to be filter, index, and aggregate, and that's going to give me 90% of what I would ever need to do inside Excel.
Good answer. Aggregates.
And that is
very, very good.
Power BI mindset, filter and aggregate. That's it.
I would say 3 things. It groups, filters, and aggregate.
It does, but that's your filter context, isn't it? When it groups.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's in terms of
yeah.
That was the spark of genius, anyway. That then stuck with me about how to think differently about formulas inside Excel by having a Power BI mindset.
I didn't realise there was the aggregate function until we were in the Munich meeting, Giles. Yeah.
And it was amazing how much, who presented that? Because I remember that. It was unbelievable how much you can actually do within the aggregate function.
Within aggregate. So explain what aggregate is, Mark, because some people might not know.
Aggregate is a bit like subtotal. So subtotal allows you, or aggregate, so you can select a range and then you can say what function do you want to perform on that range. If it's sum, average, min, max, you can then, there's small and large, so you can get the second largest and the third smallest and all those other things. So I think there's 15 different aggregations inside aggregate, and then you can use it on a table or a range where if you hide rows, it will then say if you want to sum or average or whatever you want to do on a range and include the fact that rows might be hidden and take those into account. So it can do a lot of stuff. So they are my Excel functions. Can I go through my DAX ones now as well?
Can I just jump in on aggregate, because it's my favorite feature for ignoring errors. So if you want to sum a column but ignore errors, aggregate. Awesome. Love it. Love that little trick in it. Cool. Nice. Sorry, that was me. Yeah, Mark, go on.
So my DAX functions, now this might be a bit more controversial, because obviously Sue is a Power BI hero and I'm a Power BI wannabe, right? So the functions I've gone with are calculate, selected value, and all.
Good call.
Sue's thinking she's not happy with that. And my sense is she's going to challenge you.
No, I'm just thinking about it. I calculate for sure, although, some would argue that maybe filter, because depending which way you go. Count rows every single time. Count rows. Simple. It goes back to keep the simple. Count rows all the time. Selected value or all. Oh, that's a good one.
Because if you're going to use a disconnected table, you're going to need a selected value in there.
Yeah, I don't use disconnected tables very often.
Oh, I use them all the time. See, that's why I'm a wannabe, right? That's why I'm a wannabe.
So I went for the DAX. Given we're on that topic, so I went for the filter function, because you can do stuff without even though I would use calculate all the time, you can get by without it. Sum X, because there's not a lot of alternatives if you haven't got that. And all as well. I think filter and all combined can be pretty powerful.
It's powerful, and the Sum X just to iterate over everything.
Yeah. I think if you use concatenate X coupled with other functions as well, you can do like more stuff. It's a bit like but those have been mine. Any for you, Sue? What would your 3 DAX ones be?
Would be the calculate.
Yeah.
I prefer calculate to filter. Please don't kill me, Brian Julius. But it's just I've grown into Power BI having to understand calculates, and now it's just easier for me to use calculate. Count rows. I just love count rows, and I think probably some X for me.
Yeah,
be some X.
Cool.
In Excel, I'm not that good in Excel in using things that I want to use all the time, but it would probably be aggregate. I use just the basic ones you've got there, sum, if, and, or, min, max, and average. So I use all the time.
Yeah. Giles, do you have?
I'm gonna, yeah, but instead of doing, because I just don't think I'm strong enough on Power BI to give a kind of good enough answer on that. But I've got two versions of Excel. One is like with a traditional mindset, which is I'm doing more and more stuff at the moment with Excel BI's challenges and recording me trying to get better at, lets, lambdas, dynamic arrays. If you ignore all of that stuff, I probably would have said things like sum ifs, EO month, or a date function like EO month, and maybe like an X lookup. I totally aggregate's a much better shout, to be honest, but ignoring that. But then in modern Excel world, I mean, I've noticed with all the Excel BI challenges, I've used filter in every solution without exception, I think. So I'd probably be going down the let lambda filter route. Let and lambda is a bit of a cheat because you open yourself up to use anything else. So yeah, probably those two different versions, a modern Excel 3 and then a traditional 3.
But you see, if you're going to do that, then within Power BI, you've got DAX. You've all gone for DAX, but there's Power Query. So you're not thinking about the functions within Power Query. And I don't do very complicated DAX. I try not to because it makes my head hurt. Although if I do, I use Tabular Editor to help me. But it would be the Power Query I'm in pretty much all the time and the functions in there.
What would your top 3 Power Query functions be?
GroupBy. And then within GroupBy, you can do all sorts of iterations on the tables within.
Just want to maybe suggest Unpivot.
Mine.
It's a great
just
shout.
In case anyone overlooks that one.
Yeah.
I came at it from an approach of so in terms of most commonly used, it's for me sum ifs, X lookup, and probably unique. But I'm not using that much Excel stuff these days.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, what can't I do with Power Query? Because I could do
everything with Power
X lookup. I could replace with a merge or a relationship in a model potentially. And some of the filtering and stuff I could do in Power Query and other bits and pieces like that. Sum ifs, some can do everything that sum ifs can. Aggregate could do everything that sum ifs can nowadays. Same as sum product, some can do everything that sum product can and all those sorts of things. Yeah. So it came down to sort of stuff like index or X match or some of those or VStack or something more dynamic like that I think I just couldn't go without now, having used them that often.
Some products are a really interesting one because some products would have been in my top 3 without a shadow of a doubt. But as far as I see, there's almost no use case now for some product at all with modern Excel. And I used to love throwing out a sum product, and it blew people's minds. Like, wow, look at what you've done there.
What is sum product? Is that where you add up a certain category?
It was kind of the stop me if I say anything silly here, but it was, for me, it was the easiest route into array modeling in the grid. Like, you can actually do some pretty sophisticated array based calculations within a sum product. But with modern Excel, you can literally just use the logical operators and arrays, ranges without sum product, and you get to the same result.
So sum product was effectively just calculating conditions and then getting a list of true and falses for all those conditions and then multiplying that true or false by a value. So therefore you then ended up with true times a value, which then true was equal to 1. So therefore it then returned a value. So it was kind of a a Boolean logic, true, false multiplication type thing, which you then multiply against a number to return that number. But now, sum does, dynamic arrays handles all of that without needing to use a sum product.
So a bit like in BI, sum x with an if statement. Would that be correct? Sum x would iterate over each row, and the if statement would tell it what to do. Yeah,
but on a sum product, you could go two-dimensionally as well. When sum x would obviously go row by row, because that's how data works in Power BI. But with the sum product, you can go horizontally and vertically.
Oh, wow.
Interesting question for the three of you on that front, which is one I've thought about. So if you're training people who right at the beginning of the journey, do you even bother showing them some product now, or do you just try and take them straight into the modern sum array approach?
No,
you probably skip it.
I never actually use sum product.
Oh, really? I used to use it all the time.
So like sum ifs was sort of good enough for me for the things I needed, and sum product was a really rare occasion. But then, sort of, it's been 8 or 9 years where I've just been doing, DAX and Power Query stuff largely, rather than any of the financial modeling-y type stuff. So
same.
I think some product is more, because if again it comes down to tables and data structures and all that kind of stuff. Because if you're only working down a single dimension, which you would be with a table or something similar, then sum ifs would give you all of that. It's only if you're working on something which isn't structured as data, which in a financial modeling world, or if you're just using the grid, then you could come across those circumstances.
Exactly.
But anything that goes into a table, then it made that concept obsolete. And because Power Query now, you can shape stuff and then get it into the right shape before you even need it. So I think we can avoid that complexity of some product anyway, just by using Power Query in the right way.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
I do. Just try and get everything as simple as it goes back to the point before, keeping it as simple as possible.
Yeah. I don't think I saw anybody on the LinkedIn comments mention some product actually.
Oh, really?
I was honestly surprised at how many people mentioned let and lambda, and you mentioned it as well, Giles. So just as something you couldn't live without, given it's so sort of new. It's just like, oh wow, okay.
The flexibility, isn't it? You can just do anything.
Well, I guess DAX as well. Then, if you're going to say let in Excel, you've got to say var in DAX.
Yeah.
The same concept. State your variables type thing. So, Sorry, Giles.
I only mention it because I've been doing these challenges, and I've very much been forcing myself into a mindset of you have to find a solution in one cell, which almost always then leans into, okay, this is getting a bit messy. I'm probably going to need a let. And then when you get, we're going to talk about this in a bit, but when you get into suddenly you hit a formula that doesn't work the way you think it will with an array and a spill output, for me, it's then like, oh, well, I'm probably going to have to use map or by row or something. So they come as a bit of a package then, I think, as well, let and lambda and helper functions.
Is there a danger with let that it gets misused and people just do write mega single formulas rather than helper column type stuff?
I have massively strong views on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think it gets overdone?
I'm not sure it is currently being misused very much, because I think the people that are using it are very experienced, intelligent programmery stroke codery people, and even the likes of Craig Hatmaker and Dim Early and others would be the first to say, like, hey, there are times when this is appropriate and times when it's not. I think it'll be interesting as more of the general population of professional Excel users start using it. But yeah, I mean, I've spent 20 years learning and teaching people to go, keep it simple, separate your logic out, have as many steps as you can to make it easy for other people to follow the logic. And then you get into let and lambda world and you're kind of going, oh, here's this thing where you can just do it all in one cell. Isn't that cool? Which it is, by the way. It's really cool, but also it's very risky, I think.
But it's a bit like the same in Power Query. Instead of doing each step by each step, you can sort of nest them in to make it more efficient.
Yeah.
But then it is that dilemma as to who's going to maintain it, and
exactly.
the great thing with Power Query is you can add comments in using the properties, so you can write the logic behind what you've done to remind yourself, even if it's you that's maintaining it. So,
and you can do that with lambdas, in particular, the 5G lambdas that are being created. They're coming with a lot of that additional descriptive, content.
But then you can argue what you can do is you can just pop it into ChatGPT, because if you put lots of comments in, then it makes your code bulky. But what you could do is you could even argue, well, actually, do I need to do that? Because if I put it into ChatGPT now and say, comment this, it'll comment it all for me.
Goes back to this user versus developer argument, which I think will rage on for a while now. It may even become an even more contentious argument, because potentially you are reinforcing the split between developers, the people that can understand the code and tweak it, and the people that use it in general, which is an interesting one.
I would say, though, that ChatGPT is, helps tremendously with that, because it.
I mean more broadly, like that. The use of things like let and lambda would do so. But also, I think I'm certainly not in that position of comfort yet, where I'd think, okay, if I don't understand the code, I'll throw it into ChatGPT and just trust the answer and leverage it for my multi-million-dollar modeling project. I don't know. I'm not there yet.
Good for explanations of the code, though.
Yeah, I wouldn't throw it. I would ask it to explain it to me step by step, and then you can work through it. So you can use it almost like as a teaching tool to say, well, explain this to me, and why does it? And I've noticed in the recent iterations, it doesn't just give it to you, it explains why it's doing it the way that it does. So it came across more now as a teaching tool as well as a doing tool, which I thought was interesting.
I would say that because your comments aren't just describing what the code does, but also the context in which you're using it. So your comment might be, I've had to use it this way because of whatever reason. Which ChatGPT isn't going to know. It's just going to describe what the code does. But hopefully your comments give more around the context rather than just code. So I think there's still space for comments which give the contextual understanding of why you use that.
Yes, purpose, definitely.
Nice.
I would agree with you, Mark. You're right.
He's in. The first sort of half hour of a training course, it's introducing Power Query and stuff, and it's always like, here, comment your step and add the why you did it, because you won't remember next week, and nobody else. It's the why. That's what you won't remember why you did it, why you put a filter on something, or why you did this. So
yeah.
Cool. So is that question of the week answered? Did we have anything else? Was there
Is it so? What else did we see on the LinkedIn page? Because that's really interesting. So you said you saw a lot of let and lambdas, no sum products.
Filter was in there. A lot. Unique. Some of the count functions, some of those things as well. So those are the sort of main ones. There are a few sort of people picking various other bits and pieces. But
there was one maverick who wrote, I think, who had VLOOKUP. One maverick.
Who was that?
Well, if all their spreadsheets are built using VLOOKUP, then they still need VLOOKUP, right?
Yeah.
Clive Petty. There you go. You are in a category of your own. You have VLOOKUP. These are your top three.
Good
nice.
Right. Let's move on to the
jingle.
On time.
We get a jingle.
I haven't got a jingle for this one, actually. Let's not overdo the jingles. Well,
you don't have a main topic jingle.
Disappointed.
No.
How have we overlooked this?
I've used up all my credits for this month. All right. So we've got main topic.
Formulas don't work as expected.
Yeah.
When formulas don't work as expected. So who wants to set the scene here? I think we were talking sort of offline about this a bit. I think was it Giles or was it Mark? That
Can I
raised this
set the
as a-
scene of how we got here? Because
Yes,
where I
please.
landed at the end was I watched one of Mark's awesome videos, which I was like, okay, yeah. So I'm on BI challenge, Excel BI challenge 6. I just posted yesterday.
Where are you posting them? By the way, someone was telling me about them and said it was hilarious. You did one and you did it in about 5 minutes, and then you went, "Oh, what am I going to do now?"
yeah, that's happened once. The rest of them I just waffle on for about 20 minutes.
Where are you doing it?
On my Excel on the Road YouTube channel, and it's genuinely like I'm not prepping, so I am. Luckily, I haven't come really unstuck yet, but I'm certainly not solving these things well at first run. But what I'm hitting all the time are these different issues that are very particular to certain function types, and things like the array of an arrays issue. But it's not just that. And I'm not quite where I think Mark is yet to have the kind of breakdown in my head of, oh, this one doesn't work like this. The one that I hit quite early on was text split, where if you've got text split, you've got a 10 rows of data in a list and it's text with commas that you want to split by column. Text split on the first row will, if you have the comma as the delimiter, will split it across spilt array by column. And your brain naturally just thinks, oh, well, if I put the range as the input into text split, surely it will just spill that array down and over the rows by column, comma delimiter. And it just doesn't. And even if you throw a map on that, it still doesn't work. It throws a calc error over it. So it's one of those where that is, as far as I understand it, that is a genuine array of an array block that Excel just at the moment doesn't do. And I eventually landed on one of your videos, Mark, which explained a few of these kind of weird little issues that you have with particular functions.
I haven't tried it, but I wonder whether with a text split, I haven't tried this, but if you were to use an expand to increase the size of the array, whether you could then use a map or a biro, whatever you're doing, to then spill that out. That might. I haven't tried it. That was just off the top of my head.
The common workaround at the moment, which you're probably aware of, is you text join. So you text join all of the rows first, and you add a symbol or a character that isn't in the text, like a ampersand or whatever, and then you text split again. So you've put it all into one cell, a big text string in one cell in array world, and then you text split, but you've got a column and a row delimiter, which is a horrible workaround.
Yes.
Is this something you would do?
I have a video on it.
Instead?
Oh, do you? I need to watch your video as well.
But somebody commented in the video that it's limited in terms of the number of characters you can actually do that with.
Okay.
There is some, for demo purposes, you're doing 20 rows on your screen, but there's something that hits in terms of how the text join, text split can handle it. But I've never tried it in real life, so. Yeah,
well, I've been battling my way through it because I just get the feeling you have to get as much experience hitting these blockers and mentally thinking, oh God, it's this thing again. How do I work around this? But yeah, it's been a bit of a slow battle so far.
That was something I wanted to mention. It's at what point do you stop and you say I need, because there is the logic to say I've got to work this through to a point so that you can understand the complexities of the solution and learn from it, but you then need to stop and walk away instead of, because you can get used. I found myself at times getting into this code wormhole where you're like, you're so in it that you just have to keep going. But actually, it's at what point do you stop going down that hole of fixing a problem and walk away and go for a run or go for a walk or do whatever you do and let your unconscious brain think about it and then come back to it or reach out for help. And it is that dilemma as to at what part do you stop considering it cheating if you go and find the answer before you've spent enough, and what is enough time working it out?
Yeah, it's a good point. I like to struggle a bit, and I kind of have this approach with training. I like students to struggle a bit, but not to the point where they're literally tearing their hair out. anyway, I've spoken a lot there, but Mark, your video was awesome. I need to watch yours win, but Mark, I feel like you're probably 2 or 3 steps ahead of where I am and where I want to get to, really.
Well, I mean, I don't do a lot of text strings, so it's so the theme you just said there isn't. I knew the array of arrays issue, but it's not something I've ever actually had to encounter in real life. So it's not something that I've looked at. But there are lots of those quirks around formulas that don't work as you expect. The one that kind of tricked me out was EO month in Excel, which gives you the end of the month, and it has it has effectively 2 scalar values, which are the date and then how many months you want to go backwards or forwards. And I think on the date, that one spills correctly, but then if you try and spill the number of months that you go backwards or forwards, that doesn't spill and gives you an error. So on that one, you can use you just need to, because if it's in a range, if you can force it to an array, it then spills correctly. So you can use a plus or a minus or something, anything just to convert that range into an array, and it then calculates. And I think it's on that one, it is, I think the functions that were created in the analysis tool pack, I think it is, were coded slightly differently. They were then recoded and brought into Excel. Then I think like year frac and other ones are in a similar category, that they don't always spill as expected. So you have to kind of handle those as arrays and do some additional trickery. The other ones that I found out, which is why I mentioned and or, is that so I released a video last week on about how you change, was it static formulas to dynamic formulas, and this was a real example that I worked with a client on, and they had a schedule that was very similar, and in their logic formula they had an and or an or, I can't remember which one it was, inside their if, and it just wouldn't spill, and I couldn't work out why. And eventually it's because and doesn't spill. It just gives you, it just accepts everything and just puts it all together and returns a single value. But then you can use, if you just understand how arrays work at a basic level of, I want to, like broadcasting and lifting and all that stuff, that when you multiply like trues and falses together, you then get a true or false, and however that works. So then you can just use standard logic inside Excel of true times true equals true and true times false equals false and all that stuff. A bit like going back to that sum product piece, but you can use that inside your formula to then create the logic rather than using and or. So therefore, I partly think and or are also dead as well in terms of functions, because I just don't know if we need them anymore, because we can now use logic and arrays properly. So they're other ones where the formulas just don't work as, or they don't spill. So EO month, anything from that analysis toolpack, and an or also don't work as I would expect them to.
Oh, sorry, go on, Giles.
I was just going to say, the thing that jumped out from your video, Mark, was when you were saying, like, even just at the highest level, some functions will only accept a range in certain parts of the syntax. If you try and stick an array in, it will just not work. So that's the logic gap for me, is like, God, it looks like it's the same thing that you're putting in, but if it's a range from cells, it'll work. If it's an array that you've made in the array world, it won't work.
There's also elements around, so a lot of functions. So you think about so sum ifs, for example. So sum ifs. So often it's an understanding of what is, I said, so scalar values and lifting. So if you've got so with a sum ifs, you might say I want to sum whatever the range is, where whatever your range you want to test is equal to whatever the value you want to test against. So what you're testing against is a scalar value. So it's a single value. So sum ifs is expecting you to provide a single value in there. If you provide multiple values in an array or a range, it then lifts that formula, and that's what then causes it to spill. So some of it is understanding what causes which arguments in your function are scalar or expect a single value, and therefore providing an array or range then causes that formula to lift and then calculate properly. And so when you get functions like VLOOKUP, XLOOKUP, all of those, where you have that single value, they all lift correctly. When it came to the filter function, so I thought, I'm checking whether my range is equal to whatever it is, and it gives my filter. And I thought, in my mind, that was just a scalar value, right? I'm just saying it equals this. But because it's actually a true or false logic test, it's not a scalar value. So multiple filters to spill was a real pain. And I've got a video on that where I used a reduce lambda. I think there's probably a better way, but that didn't work as I expected either, because it didn't have this concept of scalars that I was expecting it to have.
Interesting.
Is everyone bored of my talk about scalars and lifting?
Well, no, it all goes back to your data types, because within Power Query and you can do certain things to certain different data types, certain data structures, and that's how they're programmed. So not bored makes sense.
We're all just going to end up chucking +0 on the end of everything to see if it spills, It's just just like wrapping calculator around, 17 parts of your formula. It's just, it'll work eventually. No, don't do that. So I think I'm slowly, I'm in Giles's camp, really. I'm slowly starting to get my head around this thing of, okay, it needs to have a range address type thing. You could do equals address, and it should be able to give you an address of that area. Or it's a list of values, essentially, that array of values. And while they can look identical, they're different concepts. I was blown away when XLOOKUP actually returns a range. So XLOOKUP returns a range, and if it's only one cell range, it spits out, or a couple of, it can spit out the values potentially. You can also just use the address function to get the address of that returned cell. So I've got a little demo where I hyperlink to the actual XLOOKUP value. So it returns the value, but it's also wrapped in a hyperlink, because XLOOKUP actually returns a range, which is that's the first time I ever came across this, even thinking about this as a concept, that a value isn't just a value. It can be a range, it can be an array, it can be.
For BI, what we can do, if it's expecting to have a table returned, which is the same in a sense as a range, and it's only returning a single value, then you can wrap it in curly brackets, and it then sees it as a table. So it will then return that value, even though the code is written to return a table, but you want it to return a single value. You can wrap that value in curly brackets.
So just sparked my memory about something, Sue. So in DAX as well, the thing that still gets me and used to all the time is whether you use last date function or whether you use max of a date column.
Yeah.
And it's just like they both return a single date, but one's a table. Last date returns like a single cell table, whereas max just returns a scalar value. So this concept is, it's just hard. It makes things complicated.
And I've never found a definitive list. So when I kind of started struggling with this stuff with the XLBI challenges, you can find individual videos like Mark's and yours as well when I need to watch. But in my head, that somebody needs to create, maybe we should do it. There should be a definitive list of like, here's all the functions, the top 50 that everyone uses. Here's the things that it does and doesn't do in this modern Excel array space, because otherwise you just got to learn it all into muscle memory, which is pretty hard.
I mean, Rick, he's done Power Query.how. Oh, what's his last name? Rick de Groot. Yeah. Rick. He's done the most awesome website, which basically lists all of the documentation for M and in Power Query and tells you exactly what it needs and why, and examples and everything. So we're cutting BI. We're covered with Rick with Power Query.how, and for DAX Guide by the SQL BI is just brilliant, because again that will go through every single function in DAX and specify exactly what it returns and why with examples.
Both of those sites really highlight how poor Microsoft's documentation of their own functions are. Because I know that Rick started off with the basic, the basic Microsoft documentation, but then over time he's then added to it and added to it and added to it. So now he's got like these functions, he's got examples that actually make sense, and are actually examples like on the Microsoft site. There's examples of scenarios of things that you would never ever do. It's like it's purely there just to illustrate how something might work, but because it's so obscure, you then, or the example's so obscure, you then really can't picture it in a real world context. So I think so both of those sites are fantastic at bringing out the quirks around some of those things. There was one in Power Query the other day where because if you have a list, you can convert a list to a table using there's a button that goes to table, but also you can just use syntax to then, rather than using a function, to convert it to a table. And I wanted to automatically change the data type to a date, and I was fighting against it. And eventually I went to powerquery.how, and Rick's got a little sentence there that says you can only convert it to a text. And I'm like, there we go. That's why it doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
That's what we need.
Yeah.
I think he used, he'll tell me if he's wrong, but I think he used Power Query to build most of his site. It's actually built using Power Query.
I think a lot of his code is written into a database or something, and then it generates the HTML pages.
Yeah. It's just genius, isn't it?
It's next level.
So clever.
A thing I will never do because I'm just not clever enough.
Onto the list it goes.
Can you imagine your tattoo if you did though, Giles?
Jeez.
I'm not getting any Excel-based tattoos, so that's too much.
There's a Power BI one I wanted to mention in terms of things that don't work, which is the it's to do with the sort by column. So when you're there's a bug essentially. Yeah. So if you would want to do, let's say you want to say, what's my budget for the full year? But you want to be able to click on a slicer for each month, or you want to do a chart showing you cumulative actual sales. But you want a nice straight line that's your total budget for the year, so you can see how far you're off. So you try doing, calculate the sum of the budget, comma, remove filters to do with months or whatever. And you drop it in and it actually filters by month. And it's because you haven't added in the fact that you've also sorted your months in calendar month order, or there's this, there's these, so where do you, there's nothing, to make you even want to look that up. It's just certain bugs and features, you just think you've done it wrong, right? You're following the rules. So it's some of those sorts of things. I think there needs to be some more documentation inside the tools for very common issues that catch people out, even within the function documentation itself. Sort of,
or even to code it in automatically, because if you're going to put the month in, then generally you're going to have sorted it, because one of the first things you do that tears your hair out.
Yeah But apparently it's sort of like because it's been baked in since the very first day of Power BI, even though it was never an issue in Excel, not a problem, but became a problem for some reason in the way they coded it in Power BI. It's not something they can fix without breaking all the historic models that potentially rely on it somehow. So bit of a shame. And then the other one was the DAX totals.
Oh yeah.
So again, sometimes you do a calculation. Let's say you want to do a number of months where you had sales more than $1,000. So if you put it in a nice matrix, you get, maybe you got 3 months and you got a little 1 next to each of the months that were above $1,000. But then at the grand total for the year, it's 1. So you've got 3 months with 1s, and then the total for the year is 1, because all it's doing is evaluating total sales for the year. Is that more than 10,000? Yes, 1. Whereas people expect it to be 1 + 1 + 1, 3.
Yeah.
And that's what causes a lot, that type of thing again, just throws people. And it's, I think, I'm not sure what the solution is.
I think the challenge on that is when you train people is, because people are used to seeing totals at the bottom, and when they use Excel, they have their numbers, and then the value at the bottom is the sum. You have to say to people that any of the numbers on this visual, the breakdown is not, the total is not the sum of the things above. It's the things in it it's the existence or non-existence of filters, rather than it being an actual calculation, which I think ends up being where as an Excel user moving to Power BI, that becomes quite a challenge in terms of thought process. And in fact, lots of the Power BI functions, like you try and use them and it just pops up this little message saying, "Oh, this only works on a table column," or this only works on this, then this only works on that. And then you go online and you see that people are throwing around value and values all over the place, and you're like, I don't know when to use these to hack this. But then that just comes down to experience and fighting those same situations over and over again. There is actually there is one Power BI feature, which is where if you try and sort on if you try and get your column sort. So in your table view, and you say, I want to sort this column based on this other column. If you've got duplicate values in the column you want to sort on, it goes, oh, no, you can't sort on that column. So you go back into Power Query, you give unique values, you go back, you then create your sort column, you then go back to Power Query, you take away your unique values filter, and then suddenly it just works anyway. So it's like this error message that says you can't sort on this column. Well, I'll just but I can, as long as at the time that I create it, it's got to have unique values, but after that, it can have any values it likes.
Interesting.
So, so it's so Chris Barber, who's got who runs Star Schema. He's got a course about how you create profit and loss accounts in Power BI. Just using standard visuals, so just using matrix visuals, and he uses this techniques as to how you then get your P&L structure to appear in the right way while still using various relationships. So it's worth. I think his P&L course was free. I don't know if it still is, but it's worth checking out if you're. It's probably a few years old now, but I'm not sure if he's updated, but that's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, he's good, Chris, isn't he? I've done some of
really
his things.
I've now used his basic framework. I've simplified some bits, taken some bits out, and used other bits. But that was his course with the spark of genius that I needed to solve a whole load of other Power BI problems.
Very good. I want to go back to Sue's point from earlier about what to do when you get stuck.
Yes,
and I think Sue's stated it as I would, and it happened to me the other day as well. It's just, you got to think about walk away and think about some stuff differently sometimes. Push into it enough, which is
enough that
don't
the
give
little
up.
back of your brain. It's almost like the back of your brain soaks it in, so you understand it enough to know what the problems are. Then you need to go for a run, Win, because when you go for a run,
with a dog.
Or go for a walk with a dog, then you're just chilling and enjoying, and your little brain is turning over whilst you're doing it, and then you come back, you think, should have done it that way, and then it just works.
If you're getting stuck in DAX, which is where I get stuck all the time these days, I have learnt enough now to go, right, this shouldn't be this hard.
Yes.
Therefore, I'm probably thinking about it wrong.
Yeah.
All right. If I carry on for another hour thinking about it, going down the same path, I'm just going to end up deeper in the rabbit hole, and it's just going to be a waste. So how do I approach this differently? How do I mock up a really tiny little sample data set just to take my brain away from what I'm doing as well, to distract. So that time of mocking up that little data set, the little table, just makes me sort of focus differently. And then I think, can I do something in Power Query to make it easier?
Yes.
Am I thinking about the filters in the wrong way, which is normally what the case is with DAX? And then I find that I tend to make a bit of a breakthrough. Whereas in the past, I'm guilty of just sitting there for 4 hours, just getting stubbornly bashing my head against a wall.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
With Excel problems, so there's, if you think about really simple problems, but how you can solve really simple problems. So for example, like a sum ifs. Think of all the different ways that you could solve a sum ifs or a conditional sum kind of scenario. So there's lots. So you could use just a sum function. You could use a sum ifs. You could use a sum product. You could use a scan. There's lots of other ways that you could calculate this. So each of these ends up being a almost like a different calculation paradigm as to the way you think about something simple. So if you're stuck on something, often it's because you're stuck in one paradigm and you're there thinking the only way I can do a sum ifs is if I use a sum ifs function. I'm often thinking about other ways to solve, or already having a list of basic ways that you can solve other things, then kind of think, well, if I think about it from this perspective or this perspective, because then that removes often all of the assumptions that you've made from the start. You're like, I'm doing this, therefore I must. Like your brain gets fixed. Like if you've got a spreadsheet that you've worked on and you've created 50 sum ifs already, the next time you get a conditional sum situation, it's got to be a sum ifs, because that's what your brain is now thinking about. But obviously, if you can reset it to say, right, what are the other ways that I could approach this and could handle this? Often you then build up something again from the ground up, rather than being stuck in your current assumptions. I find that's a useful way of solving those kind of problems.
And I'm experiencing that, but now in the modern Excel kind of learning journey. There's a guy called I think I pronounced this right, Gene Woolley, who's been commenting on all of my challenge videos and giving me amazing advice. And it's even little things like when I hit one of these spill issues, I can very quickly turn to map. But then Gene quite often is in the comments saying, like, you know, you can use map, but also you could use by row. You could do this other thing that avoids any of these functions. So it's exactly that. The more I hit these stumbling blocks, I'm then now naturally going to map. But then I've got people coming to my comments and going, but here's 3 other things you could have done, which is amazing just to see the variety.
Oh, what a complete and utter delight to have people helping you on your journey and feeding their expertise in.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I'm going to look at these just to giggle at you and to learn. I want to learn modern Excel. One of the things Brian Julius said, which I sometimes do as well, is explain. So like you said, when it's breaking down the problem, you're decomposing it. And he uses a rubber duck. I've got a little toy that my son gave me. And you explain the problem to the, you know, mine's an elephant, to the duck or whatever. And sometimes by explaining what the problem is, then you're having to do it step by step. And that helps. But I had my meetup group last night, and I had Paul Pennant on it, who went through SharePoint. He's an MVP. And he said he uses ChatGPT, and depending upon the level of the question that he wants to ask, he asks it to interview him and ask him a certain number of questions. So if it's something he's not that interested, ask me 3 questions about this topic, and that then gives ChatGPT the textual basis of what he's trying to do and why. And he said if it's something, because we were talking about, I was trying to get an API to work, so he said so he said something like that. You might say, ask me 20 questions about how to get an API to work. And so it then might start asking you, like, well, what language are you using? Where is the website? What are you trying to do? And then you're helping it understand the nature of your problem, not just the code. And I thought that was an interesting concept.
Yeah, I like that. I can see that working.
I think with a lot of these basic, or with a lot of these challenges, so, you know, going back to what Sue said earlier around, was it the more of an expert? I'll paraphrase it, but the more of an expert you are, the simpler you keep things, or something like that. And I think a lot of it comes down to having a really good understanding of basic things, which most of us don't have, because we start. When I made a conscious effort to try and understand how M works, once you actually get to the point of looking at, right, what's a value, and then we can combine values together in different ways, suddenly M actually isn't that difficult. But we start at a table level often, which is already a, you know, 3 steps down the line, and therefore we start 3 steps down the line and then start working with things, rather than going right from the ground up of what's a value, what's a variable, and how all these things build up. So often just having a really good understanding of the basics is what we need, but we start too far down the line because the basics either aren't interesting, or we're not even aware that there are more basic things because we're not presented with those things.
Yeah. And also, you know, we've got different people that are all learning from us, and they give themselves such pressure, and you just say, look, you know, it's about being kind to yourself, and you tend to find if you've got a problem, then you solve it. And so it's working towards things that will make your life easier to understand, and learning things because you need to. I mean, obviously you do want to learn things, but usually I have a reason to want to learn something, which helps with motivation. You're conscious of the time when in your dinner.
Yes. Any closing thoughts?
We've only had one jingle. Is there only one jingle for this?
Yeah, I don't over jingle people. Just got to
think at least 3
keep them wanting more.
Oh.
I want more.
It's got to be next time. All right, we'll go
You
up to 2 jingles next
more.
week. Yeah. And I'll try to do one for Sue's comeback.
I know.
Oh,
what are you
yeah.
going to do without me?
I know. So
We'll be fine.
We'll miss you while you're at the
Come
conference. So
be all right.
Or maybe
Just
just
be like, no, we don't need Sue back. We've got Deb now.
I'll be in place, and then I just need Win to get ill or something, and I'll be in charge.
That's it. All right, folks. I think that's a good place to stop. Thank you again for your wonderful conversation.
Maniac.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Maniac grinning. Yeah.
All right, folks. We shall catch everybody, apart from Sue.
Apart from me, I'm going to be in Stockholm.
Yeah, say hello to Sue if you're in Stockholm.
Yes, please do.
Ask her for a sticker.
Hello. Yeah, I've got stickers. Have you two received your stickers?
I have. Unpivot.
I haven't checked my postbox in days, so I'm not sure. But I will. I'll check now.
I'm so glad I put a first class stamp on it.
Awesome,
right, folks. Catch you all next time.
See you all.
later.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.